Hey guys, this is Bebe872 and on this video we'll talk about the champion tier list and meta for set 9. Now, the main route is like this. 1 costs are much more better than 2 or 3 cost carries. 4 costs are probably the strongest carries in the game right now, and then 5 costs are very powerful, but they're more of a happy accident than a composition that you try to go from the first place. So what this means is that you do want to go for these 1 cost rerolls at level 4 and 5 if you have a very good angle, augment, and item sign for it. And if you don't go for this, you do not want to go for 2 cost 3 stars or 3 cost 3 stars. I do not recommend it too much because most of the 2-3 cost units, as we will see later in the video, are more supportish than main carry-ish. So you either want to go for a strong build-up into value, such as level 7 and 8 roll downs to get 4 cost 2 stars online, or you just want to roll down at low levels, get your 1 cost 3 stars online, get that tempo for the mid game, and secure a very decent placement. Okay, so here we're gonna go into champions one by one to show exactly why the meta looks like that case. We're gonna look at the stats, we're gonna look at the damage like ratios per each unit, and I'm gonna show you guys the definition of efficiency. So when you look at Cassiopeia has a very decent like a damage output as a 3-star, right? 380 and 114 bonus damage every time she ults the same target. Not only that, she's a Nasus, which gains bonus HP, ability power, and attack damage, and she's a Shuriman, which gives her more HP and even more attack speed. Additionally, she's also an Invoker, which gives the entire team more mana every 3 seconds. And it's the same route with the other like a 1 cost carries too. Cho'Gath is a unit that does 690 damage and has scaling HP potential. And if you look at his like his stats, he also has 700 base HP. And he only needs like 90 mana to use his ultimate as well too. So we're gonna keep on looking at these champions. Focus on the stats, guys. We're gonna look on Irelia. She has 450 shield value, 150 like a damage. So she's a tank like a damage like a hybrid, and her base stats is like what, 700 HP into 40 armor and 40 MR, right? Not bad, pretty tanky. And the same thing for Jhin as well too. Look, this Jhin does 1039 damage as a 3-star. Of course, he does need 4/4 out of 144 mana for some strange reason, for some very important reason. Kale also does a decent amount of damage. So it says attack steal 95 bonus magic damage as a 3-star and 95 more once you're level 6, right? So if you calculate that into auto attacks, after 10 autos, that's like 1200 damage, right? So that's 1200 damage in like 100 mana. So that's actually a lot of damage efficiency on Kale as well too. Malzahar is probably the unit that doesn't really have a very high ratio. He does do only 375, which is much lesser than Cassiopeia or any of the other damage carries we've seen like so far. But he's a void, and he does have a special effect called destroying a shield. So this guy is more of a more supportish damage like a carry than a main damage carry like Jhin, Cassiopeia, and Kale. And we're going to keep on looking for the other 1 cost too. So Maokai gets mana every time an enemy uses ability, 125 max mana. He heals 300. Now, the ratio by itself doesn't really seem that amazing, but if you check his traits, he is a Shadow Isles, which gains 40% shield and additional mana for 8 seconds during combat. It's very similar to Oxforce in set 8 when they get a shield like a burst. And he's also a Bastion. He gets bonus armor and MR, while this like a implement is double for the first 10 seconds of combat, right? So if you check it, all these like units have very insane value in terms of tank and DPS. Let's keep on checking more. So we're going to keep checking on to like Orianna. Orianna needs 100 mana. She gives 275 shield and 405 damage. So that's like a 675 ratio to your like to your team for damage and tank value. And she has a chill effect, which is a debuff of attack speed by 50%. Of course, it's more likely to be on your front line than onto the enemy like a back line. The less relevant 1 cost may seem to be Poppy. Poppy's like stats aren't really super insane because she needs 160 mana to get her ult off. She has 360 shield, 350 mana. I know it looks nice, but it's 160 mana to get her online, and she does not have any mana synergies, right? She is a Yodel, however, so if you make her into 4-star, she does deal 40% of the target's max health as magic damage and stun the target for 1.5% like seconds. So that also seems decent, but that's not the reason why Bebe's good. The reason why Bebe is good is because Bebe is a Demacia. What a Demacia does is that these units actually get a random radiant itemizations if they equip a radiant itemizations. That's the same thing for Kale as well too. So not only is Bebe a Demacia, Kale is also a Demacia unit. So Kale can also get a radiant itemization. Bebe can go to a radiant itemization too. And this is what the reroll deck looks like for these one cost units. And it just doesn't end here. If you look at Renekton, his ratio is 400 magic damage to nearby enemies, and he has 320 plus 30 healing for each enemy it hits. So his ratio is 750 for a 100 mana ultimate. And then if we go to Samira needs only 40 mana and does 150 damage. Now I know this seems a bit low, but she's a challenger. Her attack speed is very high. If you 3-star her and get a very decent itemization tech like Deathblade, IE, then the damage will be amplified very significantly with her attack speed, with her range, making her also a very formidable unit. And Tristana is our potential 4-star Yodel that gains attack speed, 65% attack speed, and does a bit of extra like a damage every time she does these auto attacks. I feel Tristana's ratios are probably one of the lower ones amongst the 1-cost units, but she does have a chance to become a 4-star by abusing the Yodel bonus. And she is also a Gunner. A Gunner is a synergy that allows the Gunner units to get bonus attack damage per auto attack, which will scale insanely high once she becomes a 4-star unit, once she has that 101 plus extra star upgrade like a DPS ready. And now we're going to look at Viego. Viego is a Shadow Isle rogue, meaning that he has assassination potential and he gets extra mana and shield value. He only needs 40 mana to use his ultimate that does 360 damage, but it stacks every time he uses it. He has infinite scaling potential. So after like 10 ults, the ratio on this Viego is going to go over 800 and the damage output is going to look insane. So overall, we can check that all the 1-cost 3-star rerolls have very insanely high stat potential, making them formidable to fight against, especially once you 3-star them. Their base stats are so high, and it's usually easier to get a 1-cost 3-star than getting a 4-cost 2-star, making it much more cheaper, cost effective, and stronger for the mid game. Okay, now we're gonna look at these 2 costs, and once you look at the numbers of these 2 costs, it'll be much more easier to understand. Now, never forget, a 2-cost 3-star costs approximately 18 gold. A 1-cost 3-star costs 9 gold. So let's see how it goes. Now we got Ashe, 3-star, 136 AoE damage for 60 mana. Do you get it? Do you get it? If you look at, like, let's say, what's a good AoE damage champion to compare with? There's no AoE damage, but I guess the best example would be Kale. Kale currently does around 95 damage per each auto attack. And Ashe does 137 damage. That's a 3-star per ultimate. I mean, if you go back to look at Ashe, she is a Freljord Deadeye, meaning that she's mostly used for utility. Her ultimate is also for debuffs mostly. So you can see that 2 costs aren't designed to be carries, but they're more designed to be supports to make your composition stronger. Okay, now we're going to look at Galio. Now, Galio actually has some decent stats. Like, he has a total mana of 140, which isn't really too high or too low. He has 30% damage reduction, 400 healing, and 850 ratios in total. And since he's a 2-cost, his base stats is around 800 base HP into 45 armor and 45 MR. Now, Galio is a very decent unit, but never forget, when you want to go for these like a 2-cost 3-stars, you need more than one tank to look for. You need other 2-cost 3-stars to look for so you can raise your odds and have a much more better complete deck. So Galio, the unit itself is okay. Probably be slightly better than like a Poppy, but if you check the other 2 costs, it can be much more obvious as to why it might be difficult to reroll for units like Galio. Alright, so next unit we're going to look at is going to be Jinx. Jinx fires 5 rockets within 2 X's of the current target. Each rocket deals 167 damage, so that's around 800 plus just damage per her ultimate. She's a gunner, so she does have AD scaling, so her damage output does seem okay-ish, but nothing like a too amazing. And the reason behind that is very simple. It's still less than a 3-star Tristana, a correction, 4-star Tristana, and it's still much less than a kill 3-star. The DPS output just cannot compare, and since it's a 2-cost 3-star, it'll take much more longer for the composition to get ready. Now we're going to look at Kassadin. Kassadin has 100 mana needed, 400 shield, 325 damage, so that's 725 as a ratio, and a 2-second like a disarm like a duration. So the stats itself aren't really like a too bad, but it's not still good enough to be significantly better than, let's say, compared to an Irelia. So if you go back up and compare it to Irelia, we can check that Irelia has 450 shield and 150 magic damage plus 30% damage return ratio. So I mean, there's a 1-cost 3-star and a 2-cost 3-star. I know that Kassadin has its own pros and cons, but the efficiency isn't really that different. A 1-cost 3-star is not that different from a 2-cost 3-star, and that's where the gap comes in. It's not really worth investing that much money to go for a 2-cost 3-star when they're not that far off from a 1-cost 3-star. But there are some exceptions. There are actually hero augments in the game that do work on only 2-cost units specifically, and there's the other exception called Clad, a Yordle. Now, Clad is a unit that does get a lot of shield value, 1200 shield value that scales with HP, and every time he ults, only 120 mana, every time he ults, he gets 1200 more shield value. So you can actually have an unkillable Clad that does have enough attack speed to get the value, and if you 4-star him, he's got that juicy execute potential. Of course, he only hits 1 unit at a time. He doesn't have any AoE, so it could be a bit risky, but the overall stats on this Clad 4-star is not to a point where it's bad. It actually could be a point where you can have an unkillable tank, especially if you have the Targon synergy. And now we're going to go into a good one. Alright, we got Set. He needs only 80 mana. That's very decent for a melee like a tank. And his ratio is 465. But there is a big trap behind this ratio. If he hits 1 unit, it's increased by 50%. And the stun duration is 2.5 seconds. 2.5 is insanely long. It's like one of the highest CC like a durations in the entire game. And he also has an augment called the Boss. The Boss is an augment that allows Set to go back into Set 4. When he goes below 40% health, he does sit-ups. Yes, and each sit-up restores him 15% of his max health and grants 20% bonus attack speed and ability power, meaning that he's going to ult more and ult harder. So there are exceptions when situationally you can choose to go for 2-cost 3-stars, especially if you have the right signs to go for it, but I do generally vote against it. But I will show you guys even more exceptions coming up soon. There are some really good 2-costs coming up now. And one of them is going to be called Soraka. Now, Soraka is a Targon Invoker. We got to check that first. A Targon Invoker means that the healing and shielding is going to be increased for your team by a significant amount, and the team will get more mana. So if you were to go for Soraka, we can give 280 healing, and on allies that's below 50% health, that's increased by 15%. So that's 420 of 420 like a healing. I'm Korean. I can't do math. and she also does 220 magic damage. So her ratio is around 600-ish, which can get amplified by her synergy. So we saw that there were a lot of tanks earlier, right? Renekton, Maokai, we have Bebe. She can heal all those units, and she can make sure that your frontline will be very, very difficult to kill. Alright, now we're gonna look at Swain. Swain also is a unit that does have the hero augment. He needs 100 mana to ult. He gets maximum bonus HP ratio of 440. It's an AP ratio as well too. And he also does 70 magic damage to enemies within 2x's every second. And if you were to check his hero augment out, then we can see that his hero augment is called Demon Flare. Your strongest Swain deals 4% increased damage per 100 max health. So if you assume that Swain 3-star has like 3000 HP, then that's going to be 120% bonus damage. That's a lot of bonus damage. And now we're going to go back to one of my favorite 2-cost units. This one I'm excited about. This unit is called Talia, and she is a Shurima multicaster. We got to check what a multicaster does first. So a multicaster is a unit that can cast their ability multiple times. So she not only ults like 1 extra with 70 mana, she can ult 2 more extra. So 3 ults altogether. And we check her ultimate is knock up, so she can stun 1 unit for 2 seconds. But what makes her amazing is her passive. Passive, whenever an enemy is knocked up by anything, so any teammate, Talia can throw a boulder around them, which deals 450 magic damage. So if you have 4 multicasters and stun 3 units with 70 mana of cast at once, then she does around 1300-ish damage, and that is a lot of damage. Of course, there is one downside to this champion, the fact that if the enemy has Quicksilver, she is automatically countered. So there is that downside, but overall, it's a design that I enjoy the most, for sure. And now we got El Diablo himself, Teemo, our fine Yordle. He only needs 50 mana to ult, meaning that he's going to ult very frequently. And he has a ratio of 555 and 500. Now, it might be a bit confusing as to why his ultimate gets weaker after he gets 4-star, but it really didn't get weaker. Because once he gets upgraded, his explosion radius increases by 1 hex. And he's also a multicaster. Multicaster, meaning that he can actually throw 3 shrooms at once. That has a very large radius, so he's basically bombarding the entire enemy's board with only 50 mana, and he can apply a wound as well too. I feel Vi is the least special because she's the same Vi as Set 8. She has a 400 shield amount, 270 damage, 670 ratio. It's actually not that bad if you think about it. She does have a Sunder effect, but you know, like same old Vi. And now we're going to go into one of the pure tanks, which is actually a Zon Juggernaut Challenger. Warwick's synergies are insane once you understand what those synergies do. But first, we'll talk about his passive. Now, Warwick's passive allows him to restore 75 health per each auto attack, which is a very huge amount considering that he's a challenger. And once he's active, he gets a 2-second stun while increasing his like a healing value for a short duration of time. And the reason what makes like a Warwick OP is the fact that he's a Zon Juggernaut Challenger. Juggernaut means he has bonus damage reduction. Challenger means he gets bonus attack speed for more healing. And he can also use a Chemtech mod, which is a specific itemization that can give super bonus effect to these Zon units. And not only that, Warwick has his own hero augment where he actually got Radiant Time Result, which used to be the previous like a Vi hero augment in the past, which gives Warwick 3% bonus damage, ability power, armor, and magic resist. The armor and magic resist making it very difficult to take Warwick down. And lastly, we have Zed, which is an Ionia Rogue Slayer. Unfortunately, this isn't the god tier Zed that steals enemies' attack damage and becomes invisible as a 2-cost carry. This isn't really an auto attack carry mostly. Once Zed ults for 70 mana, he creates a shadow at the first enemy. And he does damage to that unit, but the problem is that yes, Zed does have assassination potential, but there's also a chance that he might lack damage. So there's a chance that Zed might not assassinate the back line and just jump towards the front line as well too. And since it's only 3 hexes, there's also a guarantee of him missing as well too, which is actually a big deal. So I feel like Zed is probably the least impactful amongst all the 2 costs, which is something that I'm really sad about because I love Zed in general. I remember Set 4 Zed where he used to just one-shot like everything by himself. Okay, now we're gonna go into 3-cost carries. Now, 3-cost carries aren't like super bad as a 3-cost 3-star, but the problem with the 3-cost 3-star is that it costs 27 gold. So that's like double the worth of a 4-cost 2-star, right? So in order to hit it, you'll take a lot of economic investment. So I'm trying to talk about cost efficiency here, right? So a 3-cost 1-star is basically a 1-cost 2-star in econ, and a 3-cost 2-star is a 1-cost 3-star in terms of economy. So here we're going to focus on the 3-cost 2-star ratios mostly than the others. So we're going to look at like Akshan first. Akshan locks onto the first enemy, means that he's an assassin that focuses the enemy backline as a Deadeye unit, and each of these like shots deal 157 damage to the first enemy hit. So total damage is around like a 1000. If you have 2 damage itemizations, I think that can assassinate, but it's very similar to a Caitlyn ultimate by my experience. And the next is gonna be Darius. Darius is a unit that has 100 mana and has a very cool guillotine effect, but the damage output as 2-star is only 488. And if you check like any unit, like if you check like Darius's HP, his HP value is 1350, right? So one-shotting a unit will not be likely to happen, which is the biggest downside of Darius. This type of ultimate, when they reset after they magic kill, is only good when the damage output is insanely high. And right now, the current damage output is actually much lower than the previous like Darius in the sets, especially if we compare it to set 3 and set 4. And now we see Echo. I feel like Echo is a unit that most people like the most. Echo is a Zon Piltover Rogue. Zon means that he can use Chemtech value. Piltover means that we can summon a dinosaur. And Rogue means that he's an assassin. If you look at his ult, the crazy thing about it is that he only needs 45 mana. So he can heal 30% of the damage taken in the last 4 seconds, which is probably all the damage he takes because it only takes 4 seconds for him to ult. And he does 480 magic damage, which is a significant amount of DPS. And now we have Garen. Garen is a unit that is actually paired with Darius a lot for the Juggernaut synergy. Garen does spin 2 times every second for the next 4 seconds, and each spin deals around 73 damage in total. That's like around 500, 600-ish AoE damage. And then we have Jace here, and Jace is actually very interesting because he's also a Piltover, and he has an ultimate that only needs 80 mana to proc and gives 30 attack speed to adjacent allies. So you can see that his role is to buff your team while providing a bit of cover fire and support damage. And then we have like a Kalistar. Kalistar is a unit that needs 80 mana to use her ultimate, and every time she uses her auto attack, so every time like her auto attacks like a spear target, you have a chance to do true damage per each spear dealt. I think the active explanation is wrong. I don't think it's only 5 spears because that's only 200 damage as a 3-star. So I'm pretty sure there might be a description like an issue. But I feel since Kalistar is a Shadow Isle challenger, her DPS output, especially with stuff like Green Suits, is going to be nice. But compared to set like 4 Kalistar, which back then, Runans used to apply the spears. The Kalistar in this set will be much weaker for sure. Alright, now we have Karma. Karma needs only 50 mana to ult, and her ratio is 225. So, and every 3rd cast, she ults like 3 extra more. So, it's basically an ultimate that needs 150 mana, and the ratio is around 5 times of this. So, that's around 1,000, maybe 1,100-ish. So, her damage output isn't that bad. I feel like she's the best item holder for Ahri or maybe like a Lux late into game. She's an Invoker Ionia, which means that she gives a lot of bonus stats to the entire team. So, I feel like she's a fair unit, but I personally don't enjoy using her as a main carry, but more of a support build-up. After this, we have Katarina. Katarina needs only 80 mana to ult, and then she has a ratio of 230 times 3 daggers. Her fighting, I feel like Katarina's method of fighting is the coolest because she can actually juke enemies and dodge skill. And then we have Lissandra. Now, Lissandra is a top tier support 3-cost like a unit because not only does it give good synergies like Freljord and Invoker, just like Ashe did, it does a decent amount of damage, 280, and stuns the current target that she ulted to while providing bonus damage for the entire team, making her very valuable. Now, I feel Rek'Sai is one of the more unfortunate 3-costs. She needs 80 mana, which seems small, but it's actually very large, considering that she only does 300 damage. That might do a bit of true damage, and only 200 healing. It means that the ratios on her is too low. I mean, it does make sense since she is a Void Bruiser, so that could be a disadvantage. After that, we have a decent like a buff 3-cost support, which is going to be Sona. Sona does a small amount of damage, 175 AoE, while giving your allies 30% bonus attack speed. So she's actually a very high tier quality support unit, but in the end, she's used for utility, never main carry. And then we have Taric. Taric is the triple synergy sorcerer Targon Bastion. So that's tank, healing increment, and damage increment like a unit. He does need 120 mana, which is very high considering that he only shields for 400. But his role in the game is very similar to Set 8 Shen's, where it's supposed to absorb damage received by adjacent allies. So his job is to protect and die instead so that your main carries can live longer. So in the end, he is also utility. So his ratios are actually much higher than it should be still because of the special effect that it has. And finally, amongst the 3-costs, we have Velkas, the Void multicast sorcerer. Velkas has a very decent ratio of 255, considering that it's only 60 mana. And the scary thing about Velkas is that he's a multicast sorcerer, so he's gonna get bonus AP value, and he's gonna be able to ult 3 times at once, which does make him very formidable as a unit. So overall, we checked the 3-cost like units, and you might have noticed that the ratios aren't too crazy as compared to the 1-cost units. They're fine, but nothing like too insane. And most of the roles of 3-cost are limited to support value and not the main carry value. That means that Riot designed the game to have 1-cost and maybe 4-costs to be the main carry, while the 2 and 3 costs hold most of the utility line, which is usually decent for professional gameplay. Okay, now we got the main dish. The 4 cost in Set 9 is a very, very strong generation of 4 costs. We got sustainable auto attack damage from Aphelios, where he does a small amount of AoE damage, and after that, each of his auto attacks are super boosted by Chakram. That's why you want to go for itemization like Guinsu, so you can benefit from the extra auto attack damage. The only downside of Aphelios is that currently he's a Deadeye, and the Deadeye synergy, I don't know if it's a really good synergy because his targeting is a bit awkward, but the unit itself does a fairly strong amount of damage. And now we have Azir, our second sustainable damage that is mostly focused on AP auto attacks. He needs only 50 mana to summon a soldier, and after every third attack, these soldiers deal 140 damage, which is very long once you get at least 9 auto attacks into 3 Sand Soldiers into the fight. So once these Sand Soldiers summons at least 3, then they instantly deal bonus damage as well too. So if you give him itemizations such as Guinsu's, Hextech Gunblade, and maybe Jewel Gauntlet, your composition will have a lot of dealing, healing, and also like a utility from the healing as well too. And now we have Gwen. Gwen is a DPS slash tanker. So she's a damage AP tank, where every cast, she does 450 base damage because she snips 3 times with a very decent ratio. And after 3 casts, so after she does like 1000 damage, she gets 150 armor and MR, making her very hard to kill because not only is she a Shadow Isles, which gets bonus like a tank value, just like Ox Forces do, she's also a Slayer, so she has a lot of lifesteal potential. So she can build into itemizations like Blue Buff, Jewel Gauntlet, and Hextech Gunblade, or maybe you can choose to go for a more tankier variation. And now we got a pure tank CC unit, Jarvan needing 180 mana, leaps on enemy, deals a small amount of AoE damage, and stuns them for 2.5 seconds, which is very long duration of CC. Now, we're looking at Kaiser now, and Kaiser I feel is one of the most controversial 4 costs in the game because her damage output might seem nice, like she needs 120 mana, that's a lot of mana, in order to use her 15 missiles, which does 125 damage, so I'm expecting around 1800-ish damage from each ultimate. But if you look at, let's say, Gwen, right? If you look at Gwen 2-star has 1600 damage. And never forget, these Kalistar missiles, Kaiser's missiles split across the enemy's and they do not single target an enemy. So it'll never insta one-shot units like Gwen, which is the main issue, and there's a likely that since it doesn't one-shot the enemy frontline, the enemy team is more likely to just maul through your team. Of course, this is more coverable because Kaiser is a void, so we will have Baron buying us time and supplying the extra damage, but Kaiser as a unit itself is not really stronger than the other 4 costs, just in terms of pure damage. And now we got Lux, and right now I feel like most people argue that Lux is one of the strongest 4 costs because she only needs 60 mana to do a 1300 ultimate damage. Yes, 1300. She's a Demacia, so she can get a Radiant itemization. She's a Sorcerer, so she can get extra AP value as well too. So, and her ultimate also has a Natural Born MR Shred, which increases her damage significantly. And if you look at the game, there's an item called Deathfire Grasp. Deathfire Grasp gives plus 40 ability power, plus 30 mana, and the ability is insane. The holder fires a blast of energy at their target, marking them and dealing 20% of their maximum health as magic damage. For the next 6 seconds, the holder's abilities and attacks deal 50% increased damage to marked target and 25% to other targets. So if you give this to Lux, just with this one item, she's gonna do 3,000 damage from one ultimate. Yes, 3,000, and that's it. Okay, now we have Nasus. Nasus, I feel, is the most creative 4 cost in terms of design. His ultimate is called Soul Eater. He needs 150 mana, which is fair, and he can steal 5% max health, 10% attack damage, and 5 defense from the nearest 5 enemies. Not 1, 5. So he steals at least 25% for the duration of 8 seconds, and every third auto attack he does, he deals bonus damage. So he's a tank slash small physical damage hybrid, which I feel is a really interesting development into the comp, and his stats and values is nowhere near low. I think it's also really good to counter enemy AD carries as well too. And then we have Sejuani. Sejuani is actually very similar to Echo. She has a very high shield ratio of 700, and she has a good passive that allows the team to do bonus damage to chilled units, and she also has an ultimate that provides AoE chill, which reduces the enemy team's attack speed by 30%, and I think that is a very decent amount of value. After that, we have Shem, which needs 140 mana. He grants 450 shield to himself and 350 shields to 2 of the lowest health allies. So that's over 1,000 ratio of shield. And he also does 355 magic damage too, which is an amazing amount of HP ratios and a decent amount of tank value and a good amount of damage value. And now we got Ergot. Ergot right now I feel is arguably one of the weaker choices. The thing about Ergot is that he's a Zon Deadeye, so his synergies, he's mostly used as a frontliner for synergies. He needs 70 mana to ult, and after he ults, he gets shield for 350 and dashes towards the target. That's how it goes. And every time an enemy enters his range, it seems that he does a bit of bonus damage, but I don't know exactly if that is going to be too impactful or not too impactful. It depends on how the leg mechanism works. And if you check his stats, his HP total is pretty high. 900 HP, 60 armor, and 60 MR, which means that he's mostly designed to be a tanker in these Deadeye compositions. And now we have Yasuo. Now I feel like Yasuo is also another controversial a champion because he needs a lot of mana to ult. 120 mana is a lot of mana, even for a challenger unit. And his ratios are... He does do 700 damage, but he only does 700 damage for 120 mana. If you check Lux earlier, she did what? She did 1,300 damage to one target, right? Of course, Yasuo does do AoE damage. So if he hits the right targets, then I guess it could be a bit more useful. But overall, the stats I don't think is too amazing unless he gets a really decent ult angle. And now we have Zeri. Zeri is probably our favorite AD carry coming in. Now, her mana for her ultimate only costs 50, and she has a passive where she can just execute units below 12% health. And every time she kills a unit, she gets her ultimate again, and her active is this. For the next 5 seconds, attack chain lightnings to 3 additional targets, dealing 63 damage. Now what is that? That is going to be Volibear from set 7. So we got Volibear's lightning channel back in the form of Zeri. Zeri is a gunner, so she will have decent attack damage stats, and she's a Zon. Means that she can be Chemtech modded as well too, which will make her a very significant damage carry. So as you can see, the ratios on these 4 costs and their abilities are insane. Much more stronger than these 1 cost 3 stars, much more better than these 3 costs like a 2 stars, and maybe some 3 cost 3 stars as well too. And overall, I find most of these units to be very, very impressive. And now we're gonna go into the 5 costs. I honestly think 5 costs in this game are also very powerful, but I really don't enjoy saying a 5 cost meta because honestly, for something to be truly a 5 cost meta, you gotta force it every single game for that low 4% chance at level 8, and I don't know if we're gonna dead force 5 costs mostly. Mostly they're just a happy accident that shows up that makes our board a bit more stronger. So now we're gonna start with Atros. Atros, World Ender, 60 mana. Transform for 10 seconds, gaining 20 Omnivamp, and convert all bonus attack speed to attack damage. While transformed, attacks deal 416 physical damage. Yes. And the scary thing about Atros is its trait, Darken. When Atros or the holder of the Darken Blade dies, the Darken Blade is equipped to the nearest ally, granting them 450 health and 20% Omnivamp, so the team gets stronger. And Aatrox, after being equipped to a champion for 4 seconds, Aatrox will also revive on their death, which makes the composition insane. Of course, if it's late game to a point where you have a 5 cost 2 stars, enemies will also have a lot of damage, so that might be unlikely, but still, revival effect, amazing. And now we have Ahri. Ahri has 50 mana, and every 3 ultimates, her normal ults do 180 damage with mana reef effect, but her third cast does 375 damage, which is very, very decent, and she does bonus damage to enemies that already have their essence stolen. This is a very decent amount of sustainable damage. I think she's a very good support, like a damage after having Lux. I think you have Lux and Ahri together with the Sorcerer bonus, which should deal an impressive amount of damage to your opponents. And we also have like a Velvet. Velvet is usually used for 8 voids, and she also has a synergy called Empress. So if you look at her like a synergy called Empress, every time Velvet kills an enemy, they leave behind a void coral. And after she eats it, the first coral increases her max HP by 50%, while future corals increases her max HP by 20%. And every time she consumes a coral, she does 10% max HP as bonus damage to enemies within 2 hexes. So she's a girl that can infinitely scale HP while doing a lot of magic and physical damage at once. Her ultimate is a lash that requires 90 mana, so she's gonna lash out the lowest enemy 6 times and do 114 times 6 like a damage, and also do extra true damage as well too. So she's a unit that keeps getting HP and does a lot of physical and magic damage to the enemy. And now after this, we got Heimerdinger. Now, Heimerdinger is a unit that can summon a turret, and you can use your shop to buy enhancement for this turret as well too. He's also Yodel, so he does allow the 5 Yodel synergy to apply. But mostly, this unit, if you can see, 140 mana into 300 damage means that he's just used for CC utility. The main damage comes from his turret, not the Dinger itself. And if you consider the turret damage, it's actually quite insane because the turret has backline access. K'Sante is probably one of the most impactful 5 costs, especially the most important in terms of positioning. K'Sante has a skill called All Out Strike, which is basically Set's punch protocol. You slam the ground, knock the current target to the air, you smash them away to the edge of the battlefield, dealing a decent amount of damage, and if you ult them again, then you can kick them out of the board and permakill it. So if the enemy has a 5 cost 3 star, you can give K'Sante a Protector's Vow, you insta-stun it, and then you can give K'Sante a blue buff. After he dashes to the enemy, you can insta-kick again, and you can just knock out a 5 cost 3 star. Yes! After that, we're going to check Senna and Cyan first. Senna is a unit that fires a massive beam at the first enemy, dealing a small amount of physical damage, and providing a decent amount of shield for your entire team. But what makes Senna good isn't her ultimate. What makes Senna good is her a trait. Her trait is called, where is it? Redeemer. So whenever an ally gains a shield, Senna grants them 8% stacking attack speed for the rest of combat. So after she ults, our team gets shield and extra attack speed, and other Solaris, items like Solaris, which provide more shield value, ultimates from your team, which give more shield value, all give bonus attack speed, making your gunner composition very difficult to deal with. And now we have Cyan. Cyan has a skill called Glory in Death. It means that he has an AoE CC, so he charges towards the most enemy within 4 hexes, dealing a decent amount of stun value and a little amount of damage. But after he dies, he reanimates with 100% health, decaying at 8% max health per second, and Cyan can no longer use his ability, but is immune to crowd control and gains 150% attack speed. So he reanimates, starts auto-attacking, and maybe you can kill a few squishy like carries along the way, which makes him very, very scary to deal with. And now we're going to look at Ryze. Now, Ryze has 10 different ultimates. So we're not going to get into them all, but most of his ultimates are focused on utility CC and special effects that we've never seen before. So the Ryze ultimates that we will discuss here is mostly going to be focused on Shadow Isles and Shurima. So Shadow Isles, Ryze creates a portal to Shadow Isles, reclaiming 2 to 3 allies, and they return to the battlefield with 30 of their massive health. So that's like what? A revive effect on 3 units. And the best thing is that if no one died yet, the portal remains open, waiting for an ally to die. So that's like what? A Guardian Angel's guaranteed. And if you look at Shurima, Ryze can do an AoE, tornado like a damage ult that stuns the enemy, and every time the tornado like it moves, it has a chance to give us buried treasure, giving us a lot of value. So we checked out 1 to 5 cost units, and I personally felt that 1, 4, and 5 costs are the most impactful and are the most like a pro meta like units for set 9. Never forget to press a like and a follow so I can keep making more content like this. I'm pretty sure the next content will be specific tier lists per each cost unit. So will Cassiopeia be better or will Cho'Gath be better? We shall see. Hope you guys enjoy. See ya.